Learn how to use Excel maybe can be one of the most important skills that we can have. So in this video, I'm going to show you guys 10 different functions and formulas to solve real practical problems. Let's start here with the first one, using many different functions, different formulas to solve a problem. And of course, it can help you on a daily basis, for example, and we're going to use different approaches here. So in this first problem that I have here in this first data set, I have basically here my sales report. In the first column, I have the date, the order ID, then the quantity, then the unit price, and then here I have the total price. Let's say I want to know how much is my total price for the first order that I have here in my report. And then I want to know how much is my total price for the second order that I have, and then for the third one, for the fourth one, and so on, so on, so on. But instead of doing it manually, because yes, of course I can do it manually to know the total price, I just need to multiply the unit price by the quantity, for example. So if I just multiply these two numbers here, I can have the total price. Simple as that. But look, instead of doing it manually, we can use a function or a formula here in Excel to help us solve this problem. So let's start here in Excel using a simple formula that's equal to, just before we do a function in Excel, we're going to do formulas that is simple as that, equal sign, and then I select here the first number, and I need to just use now a logical operator. So for example, if I want to multiply something, I need to use here the asterisk. But if I want to, let's say, to add one value to another, I can use the plus sign. If I want to subtract something from another one, I can use the minus sign, and so on. So I'm going to start here with the asterisk, and then I'm going to select here the second value that I want to multiply. Enter, and then here we're done with the total price of the first order. Let's do it one more time here, equal sign, quantity times unit price. Enter. Okay, simple as that. But look, imagine if I have here a spreadsheet or a report that I have 1,000 rows. It can take a long time to just fill it up all the rows. So one more easy way to do it is just select here the last formula that we just did, and then I can click, hold here in the corner of the cell, click, hold, and drag down. That way I make sure all the rows contain the same formula or the same function, okay? So we're done with the first formula. Now we know how to use a formula in Excel. Let's say now we want to know how much is the total sales. I can, of course, add up all the values that make up here my total price column. So if I just add up all these values, I'm going to have the total a month. And this is what you're going to do. I can do it in 2 or more different ways. Let's start here with the first one, and then we're going to do it in a more, let's say, smarter way. Here, equal sign, and then I'm going to select here the first value, plus sign, then add to another. I'm going to add another one. I'm going to add another one. And as you guys can see, I can add here many numbers, many values. I just need to, in between these values, to use a plus sign, okay? Simple as that. But instead of doing it manually, just select one value, then another one, then another one. It's going to take a long time. So instead of doing it manually with a formula in Excel, let's start here using a function. So equal sign, sum function. I can now double click here, 1, 2, and then I can whether select the first number, comma, the second value, comma, the second value, and so on. Or even I can, of course, select all the range at once. So I can click here in the first value, click, hold, and drag down. That way I make sure I can select the entire column where I need to add up the values. Now I can close parentheses and then press enter. Now we're done here with the total a month. Now let's move on and solve these 2 more problems here. Let's say now I want to know how much I just sold by quantity, for example. So I need to just add up all these values here that make up my quantity column, for example. So I can use here, as we just saw before, equal sign, select one by one, and in between the values we can use the plus sign, or maybe we can use the sum function because it's faster, double click here, and then I can select the entire range that make up here my quantity column. Close parentheses and then press enter. Here we go. So we're done with the sum of the quantity, 154. And now let's say something different. I want to know how much orders I have. So for example, here it's easy to count because it's let's say it's a small data set, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and so on. I can count it manually. But let's say every day or every hour, every minute, every second, you receive a new row, a new information, a new update to your data set. You cannot count it manually because, come on, man, So it's going to take you too long. It's too much effort to just count. So we can use here in Excel a function that is called COUNTA function. So equal sign count. There's two functions that look like each other. So for example, here I have the count, but the count function just count numbers. And because here we have not exactly numbers, but we also have here letters, for example, and of course here this symbol, this dash sign, you cannot use the count function because the count function count only numbers. But you can use here the count A. The counting A is pretty similar to the count, but the difference is the count A is going to count everything but empty cells, okay? So I can just double click here in the count A, 1, 2, and then I can select again all the values that make up here my order ID. I can close parentheses, press enter, and do it done. Here we have 12 different orders. And let's say this order right here in the row 6, if I select everyone here, I press delete, look what happened with all the functions. All the functions automatically update for me. So this is the benefit to use functions in Excel. Whenever you just change or update any values, all the functions, all the formulas is going to automatically update for you. Now let's move on here for many other problems that we have. So what's the average order ticket, for example? I want to know, let's say, how much I just sold per customer or per client, for example. So I can use a function called average to sort it for me and to find the correct result. Equal sign average. Let me double click here, 1, 2, and then I can select here all the values that make up my total price. Close parentheses, and then I press enter. So here we go. This is my average ticket for every order that I have here, $696.96. Okay, now we can move on here for this another problem. How many orders are greater than $1,000, for example? So I know that I can look here and find, oh, this order right here, this another one here, this another one here, and this one right here. So I have here 4 orders that are greater than $1,000. Okay, it's simple to do. But let's say, as I said before, you have a large data set with a bunch of rows. You cannot do it manually. It's going to take a long time. And let's say you want to, instead of use $1,000 as criteria, as condition, you can change. Let's say now, instead of using 1,000, you need to find how many orders are greater than 1,000. You're going to use, let's say, how many orders are greater than $759, for example. You're going to need to count all over again. So if we use the COUNTIF function, we can just change the number, the criteria, and the function is going to automatically update for us. So it's much better to use that function. Equal sign, count. Look, we have here the count, count A, count if, and count ifs. Basically, the difference between the count if and the count ifs is because the count ifs, you can add many different criteria, many different conditions. So for example, if you have just more than one condition, you can use the count ifs function, okay? But we're going to stick here with the first option, count if. Double click it, and then I'm going to select here my range. That is this range right here. This is the range that I'm looking for the values that are, let's say, greater than 1,000. Okay, so comma. And now what is my criteria? And then here I need to tell Excel, to tell the COUNTIF function, hey, count for me only the values, only the orders that are greater than $1,000. Okay, so I need to just type in here greater than this sign that I'm gonna type in here, 1,000. Okay, but before we just press enter, you need to make sure to put all these criteria in between quotations. That way Excel can understand what we are talking about. So close quotations here and then open quotations marks here. Okay, so greater than $1,000, everything in between quotations. Enter, and here we have 4 as a result. And of course I can also change. So as I said before, if I double click here, instead of using $1,000, I can use, let's say, I'm gonna use 500, for example, dollars. Enter, 7. Okay, now we have 7. One, you can manually check just to see if it's correct. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay, yeah, it's correct. Let me come back here to the 1,000. Okay. Now this run right here below, it's pretty similar, but instead of using, let's say, greater than 1,000, we're gonna use less than or equal to 1,000. Here, the only thing that's going to change is the sign that we're going to use. So equal sign, count, if, double click it, and the range is still the same range that we just used before, comma, and my criteria here is going to be open quotations mark, less than or equal to 1000, for example, close quotations, close parentheses. And as you guys can see here, now I just use this sign right here. So less than is this sign right here, okay, less than, or equal to is this sign right here. And then we just combine these two together, okay, so it's gonna be like less than or equal to, like I just used here. Enter, and we're done. So we have here 8 different orders that are less than or equal to $1,000. Now we can move on here and find what is the largest order value. And to make sure it's possible, I can use here the max function to help me. So equal sign, max, double click it, and then I can select here all the values that make up my total price, and then press enter. And as you guys can see here, my largest order values is $1,093.72. And of course, to make here the lowest order amount is really similar to the max, but instead of using max, we can use min, okay? And then double click here, select all the values that we want to check, enter, and yeah, we're done. Now let's move on here for another practical problem, where I have a bunch of fruit names, the location, and the quantity. And here we need to just solve this question. How many of the fruit below we have in stock? So here I have banana, but instead of banana, I can, I don't know, type it in, let's say, apple or grape, and so on. So whenever I just change here the value, the text, the fruit name, I want to have here the total that I have from this fruit right here, okay? I can use here, instead of using the sum function that is going to sum for me all the range that I just select, I don't want to sum all the range, all the quantity range, but I want to sum just the values that corresponds, that's going to match with my criteria, with my condition. And in this case here, my criteria, my condition is my fruit name. And I can change, so banana, avocado, mango, and so on. Let me start here. Instead of using the sum, I'm going to use sum if. Sum if the criteria is met. Okay, so equal sign, sum if. And here we have three really similar functions: sum, sum if, and sum ifs. The difference between these functions is the first one, sum, is going to sum all the range that I just select, and sum if is going to sum if the criteria is met, and sum ifs is going to verify, is going to sum, is going to add up only if all the criteria, all conditions more than one, okay, sum ifs more than one criteria is met. So I can use here the sum if, double click it, and now what is my range? My range is right here, for example, okay. So this one here is my range, the fruit name, so I can select everyone here. As you guys can see, this data set is pretty much large. There is a bunch of rows here, comma, and now it's gonna, what is my criteria? My criteria is banana. I can select here the cell above, or instead, in between quotations, I can just type it in here, the name, bananas. But to make it dynamic, I can select here instead, comma. And now my sum range is gonna be all the values that make up here my quantity column. So I can select everyone here, and then enter. As you guys can see, it's returned for me here as a result 150 bananas that I have here in my stock. If I change, let's say I'm gonna choose mango. So I'm gonna type it in here, mango, enter 58. Let's say apple, enter 100. Okay, so instead of doing it manually, for example, we have, let's say, one banana here and another one here and so on. We can just ask here a help for the SUMIF function because it can really help us out. So let's move on now for the next problem that we have here, where I have the student names, the absence, and the final grade. And I need to fill it in the status, and of course here these two status that I have. One is based on the absences, and another one is based on here the final grade. So fill in the status of each student following the criteria below. So here I have, let's start with the absences. So if a student just have the absences, let's say less than or equal to 5, it's good in the status. And if the absence is greater than 5, let's say 6, 7, 8, 10, so on, it's going to be a bad in the status. So instead of just check it manually, let's say here, 2 absences, so it's good. 5 is still good. 8, no, it's bad. Okay, so instead of doing it manually, I can instead use the if function, because the if function is maybe one of the most important functions in Excel. Equal sign, because it can really help us to automatically fill things and to automatically solve problems. So equal sign, if function, and as we just saw before, here I have, let's say, the if function and, of course, the ifs function. The difference is this one here below, we can have more than just one criteria. So we can have here 2, 3, 4, 10 different criteria to use in our if function. But in this first example here, we just need to use the if function because we're just going to have one criteria. If the absences is less or equal to 5, so it's going to be good. If not, it's bad, okay? Let's just stick here with the if function, and my first logical test is I need to check if this number right here is less than or equal to 5, okay? So if this number right here, if this absence value is less than or equal to 5, like we have here, I need to type it in, comma. So if the value is true, I need to type it in, open quotations mark, good, close quotations marks, and then comma. And if this criteria is not met, I can just, let's say, open quotations mark and type it in here, bad, close quotations mark, close parentheses, and then enter. That way you can easily automate this task. And then I can just click, hold, and drag it out to make sure all the rows here contain the same function. And as you guys can see, it's working fine. It perfectly works for us. Now here for the final grade, I also need to fill it in here the status based on this previous column. But here we have the final grade. So for example, if the students got a grade that is greater than or equal to 9, it's excellent. It's greater than or equal to 7, it's good. Greater than or equal to 6, it's regular. And less than or equal to 5, it's bad, okay? So here we're gonna have to use the ifs function instead of just use the if function. Because here we have different criteria. 1, 2, 3, 4, 4 different conditions for criteria. So let's use here the if function, equal sign, if. To be honest, we can whether use the if or the ifs. But if you choose to use the if function, you're gonna need to use a nested function, or I mean, one function within another function, one if within another if function inside a if function inside an if function, you know? So you can, of course, choose the first option, but maybe it's a good idea to choose the second option, ifs function. But not all the Excel versions have the ifs function. So this is why I'm gonna opt here to use the first one, the if function, okay? But we can use the second option. We can, yes, we can, ifs function. But because as not all Excel versions have these two options, and that you can whether select the first one or the second one, I'm gonna stick with the first one, okay? Because not everyone have the access to the second one. So let me just select this first one right here, double click it. So how can I use a nested if function? So this is our function, okay? We just saw before the if function. Now we're gonna see if inside another if within another if. So the first logical test that I'm gonna check here that I want to see if it's true is the following test. So if my final grade here is equal to or is greater than or equal to 9, for example, greater than or equal to 9, for example, comma, I need to type it in excellent. But I can, let's say, whether I can open quotation mark and type it in excellent, or I can also, let's say, instead of typing in manually, I can select here the status. That way I can make it dynamic. Whenever I change here this text, this word, all my status is going to automatically update for me. So I think it's a good idea to just select here this status. So I select the status. Now I can press here the F4 key. Why should I press F4 key? To add this dollar sign just before the letter and just before the number. Okay, but, and what? Because when you just press F4 key and add this dollar sign, you make sure this cell that you just select is gonna be fixed in the position, okay? It's not gonna follow me along with your drag down, okay? So it's gonna stay at this. So this is why we need to press F4 key to lock the reference, comma. Now, what is my value if it's false? So if this value right here is not greater than or equal to 9, it can still be, let's say, good, regular, or bad. So instead of just finish my function here, I need to add another if function. So I can insert here another if function within my if function. Double click here, 1, 2, and then I'm gonna insert here my second logical test. That is, I need to check if this final grade right here is, let's say now, greater than or equal to 7, okay? If so, I can select here the good status, F4 key, comma, and as we do not finish yet, I'm gonna insert here another if function within the if function that is within the if function. So double click. And what is my logical test here? I want to check if this final grade right here now is greater than or equal to 6. If so, comma, I'm gonna select here the regular status. F4 key, do not forget it, comma, and now we can finish with this pad, okay? But we don't need to check to use a logical test here, because if our grade is not, let's say, greater than 9, it's not greater than 7, it's not greater than 6, it only can be less or equal to 5, for example. So it's simple as that. So if all the previous conditions are not met, it only can be bad. Okay, so open quotations mark, bad, or even we can just select here, okay, to make it dynamic. F4 key, close parentheses, one more time, and then you can press enter. That way you can automate this task. Let me just double click here instead of click, hold, and drag down. Double click. Okay. Now all the rows here are automatically updated for me with the correct answer. So let's say I want to change here the status. So instead of use here, for example, equal, greater than or equal to 7 is equal to good, I want to change it and type it in here. Let's say okay, for example. I'm gonna press enter, and you guys are gonna see that all the status here where I have my function automatically update for me. So this is the benefit to use a function in Excel, a dynamic function. And I just said before, instead of using, let's say, the if function, instead I can use the ifs function. So equal sign ifs function, double click here. And what is my first logical test? My first one is I want to check if this value right here is greater than or equal to 9, comma. If so, I need to type it in this result right here, F4 key, comma. And now I need to type it in here, my second logical test. If this grade here is, let's say, greater than or equal to 7, if so, I need to type in here a good as result, F4 key, so on, so on. So this is how you can use the ifs function. The difference is instead of just use a nested function, or I mean, use a function within another one, you can just, the ifs function allows you to just type it in more than just one criteria. So you have here the logical test 1, and then the value if it's true, the logical test 2, and then the value if it's true, 2, you know, and so on, so on. So it's pretty much easy to use. It's easier to use the ifs function, in my opinion, than to use the if function. Now let's move on here for the final challenge that we have. So here I have a report of all the fruits that I have here in my stock, basically. And I have here the cost of each one of the fruits. Apple, avocado, banana, blueberry, and so on, so on, okay? But what I can do with that? So look here. I have two different spreadsheets. The first one is the top 10. And then here I have the orders. Here in the orders, I have actually a report with the date, order, item, quantity, price, and the profit. But there's a problem here. I have the price that I just sold each one of these orders here, but I do not have here the cost. Okay, but I know that you have the cost here in this list right here. Yeah, but how can I just take this list and make sure all the items have your correct cost? I cannot do it manually because it can take a long time. So imagine avocado, so I can back here and search for, okay, avocados is right here, 10 and 36. So I can back here and then type it in here, 10 and 36, and so on, so on. Man, come on. It's going to take a long time. So maybe it's a good idea to use instead the VLOOKUP function or also the XLOOKUP function. These two functions here in Excel can really help me out. Of course, you have many others, different lookup functions in Excel that can search for us what we need to find as result, for example. So we have the VLOOKUP function, the XLOOKUP function, the HLOOKUP function, or even the index and match function, for example. But I'm going to stick with these two right here. I'm going to start with the VLOOKUP because not all the versions of Excel have the XLOOKUP function. So if you do not have the XLOOKUP function, do not freak out because you can use the VLOOKUP function to help you out. And I'm going to start with the VLOOKUP function, then we move on to the XLOOKUP, okay? Let's start here, so with the equal sign, VLOOKUP, and the V in the VLOOKUP stands for vertical. Let me just double click here, 1, 2, and then what is my lookup value? So the lookup that I want to search, that I want to find, is the avocado, for example, and then the apple, mango, apple again, and so on, so on. But let's start here with this first cell, comma, and now what is my table array? The table that I'm going to use to look up this item, for example. So my table array is here, in the previous spreadsheet, I can select here all this list that I have, and make sure we can follow here for the formula bar to press F4 key to just lock all the range, okay? Make sure you just press F4 key for the entire range. So for this first part right here and the second one to add the dollar signs, because that way you can lock the reference. And then comma again, and now I need to type it in my column index number. As you guys just saw before, in that spreadsheet where I have my list with the cost, I have basically two columns. The first one is the item name, and the second one is the cost itself. So as I need to bring back the cost as the result, for example, I'm gonna use here the number 2, okay? Because it's my second column that I'm gonna bring back as result, the column with the cost. So number 2, comma, and now I need to just type it in here, my range lookup. So I want a exact match, so I can double click here, close parentheses, and then I'm gonna press enter. That way I can just automatically have here the cost. So I know the avocado cost 10 and 36. If I click hold and drag it out, look, all the items that I have here are automatically with the cost. So let's just check it out if it's correct. So Apple 70 and 98, for example, and I can check here that is correct, okay? So as I just said before, I just type in there the number 2 as my column index number, because my first column that I have here that I just selected in the range is the number 1, my fruits, okay? And my cost is the number 2. So this is why I just type in there the number 2, because I need to bring back the cost as the result, okay? So it's the column number 2. Now, instead of using here the VLOOKUP function that is already working for me, let's move on and change. Instead of using VLOOKUP, we're gonna use here the XLOOKUP function. So equal sign XLOOKUP. And what is the difference between the XLOOKUP function and the VLOOKUP function? Basically, there is many situations where the VLOOKUP function cannot work properly. If you want to see a more specific tutorial about the VLOOKUP, XLOOKUP, HLOOKUP, index match, so click here in the link in the description. I'm gonna just put a video there where I just talk about everything about these 3-4 different lookup functions in a more specific way. So XLOOKUP here, my lookup value is the same, so it's my item name, comma. Now my lookup array is gonna be here in my previous spreadsheet. I'm gonna select here all the columns that make up my fruits, comma, and as you guys can follow here for the formula bar, my return array is gonna be here, my cost, all the values. Okay, now I can press enter, and here we're done with the XLOOKUP. So orange is equal to 14 and 47. Let's check if it's correct. So let's say orange is here, 14 and 47. Yes, it's perfect, correct. So let me just double click here to make sure all the rows contain the same function. And why it's returned here array row? Because I just forget to lock the reference. So this is why it's important to lock the reference. So let me just double click here in this first XLOOKUP function. And as you guys can see here, this is my range that I just selected before. I can select everyone here, F4 key, and then I'm gonna do the same thing here for my return array. Select everyone, F4 key. Okay, now everyone is correct, the lock it, let's say that way, and then I can double click it again, and yeah, we're done. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you have any questions and any suggestions to the next videos, just comment down below, let me know, because I can help you out. I can bring the video that you need, and I see you in the next one, because every day has a new video, so I see you there.